This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we start a new shar, the fifth of the sharim of the gates. In Hebrew, it's Yichud HaMa'aseh. What is Safaria calling this in English? Gate number 5?
It says fifth treatise in devotion.
Devotion. Okay, that's good. That's good. I like the Hebrew better, but that's always, the Hebrew is always a lot more specific. Yichud HaMa'aseh is a focusing of our actions, or even more than that, a, a, a unifying of our actions. That our actions should be only with one unified focus, and that is not doing it because of what people will say, positive or negative, but just doing the right thing because that's what Hashem has commanded us to do. And I'm doing it in order to create this bond with Hashem. We always say a mitzvah is a flashpoint where we can connect to Hashem, and therefore that's what it should be all about. And if people are going to give me credit for it, that should be irrelevant. And if people are going to chastise me for that, that should be irrelevant. We need to kind of tune everything else out. I always tell the story. Nan and I were traveling. We're living in Israel, traveling in for a wedding, and we were on a non-El Al flight, and we were the only, at least visible Jews on this flight, to the point that as we boarded the plane, the stewardess looks at her list of who's getting kosher food, and it was just the two of us, and said, "You must be the Ciners." So we felt sort of conspicuous, and the way the timing worked, I prefer not to daven on a plane, right? Certainly on domestic flights, it's impossible. You really can't stand. You can't put your tefillin on. So I prefer not to daven shacharis, I should say, on a plane. So when I can, I'll put my tefillin on beforehand, or if I have time to daven beforehand, I'll do that. I'll put my tefillin on beforehand, say Shema, and then just daven on the plane. But this was an international flight. At least you can stand up and put on one's tefillin and talis. And the timing was such that before the flight, I could not daven, put on my tefillin, and by the time the flight would land, it would be past the time putting on my talis and tefillin. So I just stood up and put on my talis and my tefillin, and I felt a little bit uncomfortable, to be perfectly honest. And I said to myself, I'm not going to look around at all. I don't care who's looking at me. I don't care. I'm not going to look around at all. I'm just going to keep my eyes in my siddur, and I'm going to have my davening. Ended up having a really good davening because I had plenty of time. It was no rush whatsoever. I had a very good davening. And then when I finished davening, I said, okay, now let me look around a little bit. Right, turned around, and there were video cameras, and no, there was nothing going on. People were drooling, watching their movies, falling asleep, and so often we attach importance to, or in our minds, oh, what are people? And I always tell my teenage kids, everyone's going, if I do this, everyone's going to be looking at me. And I would say, sweethearts or young man, whoever I was addressing, everyone is thinking about themselves. Everyone is thinking that everyone is thinking about them, but everyone is thinking about themselves. Don't give too much importance. And this shar of Yichud HaMaseh is when we're doing things, we do it for the right reasons. We do it, mitzvah. I mentioned Shabbos. Mitzvah, of course, means commandment, but mitzvah also, the sages say, comes from the word savita, companionship. It's a way to create a bond, a companionship with Hashem. And that's what it should be all about. And not that people are going to say, oh, Ciner's so good, or people are going to say, oh, Ciner is so bad. It really is not where our mind and focus should be. And that's Shar HaChamishi, the fifth gate, Shar, the gateway of Yichud HaMaaseh, of focusing one's actions, Bevir Ofanei Chiyuv, explaining the different aspects of this obligation, Hayot Kol Ma'aseina Miyuchadim Lishmo, that all of our actions should be focused, should be singularly, Miyuchad, Echad, singularly focused, Lishmo, for Hashem's name, Ulihizaher min ha-chonef, and to be careful from flattery, from doing things with ulterior motives in order that people will say or do positive things, say about us positive things. V'yichalek, and this is divided lepeticha. We have an introduction, and we have shisha prakim, and we have 6 chapters. The first 4 are all pretty short, and then the 5th one is where he sort of goes to town. We've had that before. We have a number of short chapters, and then some are just explode. So let's begin. Amar Amachaber, the author writes, because the previous gate that we discussed was the bitachon ala Elokim, which was having the trust in Hashem, Yitbarach, blessed is He. Ra'inu, we saw lismochlo, to bring adjacent to that as the next gate, bior ofanei chiyuv hayot kol maasei ha'avodah, the explanation of this obligation of all of our acts of service should be miyuchadim, singularly focused, leilokim levado, just to Hashem. I think something that I know I find this often, not so much on the East Coast, on the West Coast. On the East Coast, we'd have storms and electricity would go out. I would love during Mariv, even here it's happened, I would love during Mariv when the lights go out. Because all of a sudden, you're in a room with many other people, so you're davening with that minyan, with the quorum, with all that enables to add to the davening. But sitting there in the dark, you're in your own space. You're in your own space, and you're able to have that yichud, that intimacy of having this davening to Hashem, right? So this obligation, he says, that all of our actions should be miyuchadim, singularly focused, leilokim levado, just to Hashem. Bavor ma sheyesh b'davar zeh, and there is contained in this action, in this midah, in this pathway, mizakut hamatzponim, that will help to purify that our thoughts, our minds, our inner selves, ubar halevavot, and to cleanse and purify our hearts, min ha'irvuv, from the confusion, hamafsid otam, right? The confusion of turning to different things, right? Which is mafsid otam, which comes to diminish the value of our actions, right? We know that when we're entering the spiritual sphere of mitzvot, so it's not just what we do, but so much of it is really measured by where are our minds, where are our hearts, right? And why am I doing this? And what is prompting me to do this? Right? And this helps to min ha'irvuv, from the confusion and that lack of yichud hama'aseh, that lack of the singular focus, hamafsidotam, which then comes to detract. It takes away from the actions that we do. V'hatzalah, and a way that we can save ourselves, mimine ha'yipui, from these different ways of yipui, is trying to a little bit of hypocrisy, trying to present myself in a very positive manner to others, right? By my doing these mitzvot and serving Hashem, when really I'm not so much serving Hashem, we'll see later on, but when I'm doing that, I'm serving myself, I'm serving others, right? I want to get the acclaim from others. So I'm almost using, I wouldn't say abusing, but certainly using Hashem as a means to get acclaim from others, respect from others, admiration from others. Hamevi el ha-chonef. And this also brings me to, well, if I'm doing this, because I'm worried what other people will say, so I'm all about flattering other people. And if it will do well, if my doing this will look well in their eyes, I'll do it, right? Whether it is what I'm supposed to be doing or not what I'm supposed to be doing. Or if it's going to make me look bad in their eyes, I won't do it, even if it is what I'm supposed to be doing, because I'm all about the impression and my reputation. And what are people going to say? Ulihitzratzot, b'chalakot. And also that will lead me to speak. Chalak means smooth. It's interesting, right? In Hebrew, right, we're familiar with the term glat kosher. In Hebrew, they call glat kosher chalak, right? So what does glat kosher mean, right? In our jargon, glat kosher means, oh, very, very, very seriously, strictly kosher, right? Actually, glat means chalak, which means smooth. Smooth kosher, right? What are we talking about over here? So it's a term that we borrow because when we are, let's say, when we slaughter an animal, so besides the shechita needing to be done properly, so also we need to make sure that internally everything is correct. And one of the first places that often there are issues is the lungs, right? So if an animal product is kosher but not glat kosher, that means that it was shechted properly, proper shochet, under proper auspices, but they didn't check all of these internal things because the assumption is they're okay. Glat kosher says, well, let's not assume, let's check it. And one of the first places that they check is the lungs, to make sure that there is no lesion on the lungs. In other words, to make sure that the lungs are smooth. And that's where glat kosher comes from, chalak comes from. So when you have a glat kosher dairy restaurant, that is a bit of an oxymoron. But being that we use the term glat kosher to mean very a higher standard, a high standard of kashrut, that's how that term is used. So over here we're talking about chalakot. Here we're talking about a smooth tongue, right? And that's an expression that I don't remember exactly what it is, but we have a similar expression when a smooth talker. That's how we would say it. A smooth talker, right? Who's looking to impress others, but not really focused on the real content or really who one is. So we want to make sure to stay away from these things that lead us to chonef, to trying to flatter others, litratzot, or to be leaning towards smooth talking to others, litraot, in order to appear in a certain manner. Kamosha Amar Elihu, like Elihu said to Eov, to Job, right? And Eov was a big tzaddik who then lost everything imaginable. And the book of Eov, about 48 or 49 chapters of it, I'm not sure exactly, but something around that number, is about his three colleagues coming and having all of these philosophical arguments with him, explanations to him, at him, right? Until finally Hashem comes along and says, right, you can't understand me, right? You know, were you here when this happened, when I created this? Were you here when that happened? You can't understand me. But throughout the book of Eov, of Job, there are all of these philosophical discussions. And Elihu, one of his friends, said to him, Al na esa panei ish. I will not lift up my face to any man. I'm not going to show deference. Not that I shouldn't show respect, but I'm not going to be worried about what someone is going to say, right? When that's going to lead me to go against anything of Hashem, right? Let's keep one thing in mind, right? It's important that we create a Kiddush Hashem, that we act as positive, a Kiddush Hashem, sanctifier of God's name, that we, visible, self-identifying Jews, act in a way that will bring acclaim to Hashem. And even in halacha, we have this idea that if a person, let's say when I daven, I like to really shake and gesticulate and really get into it. Okay, not in the airport. Okay, right? Right? Beautiful, beautiful. That's when you're in your shul. That's when you're in your study, right? But when you're around other people, don't do things that's going to make you and therefore who you are representing, the Jewish people, right? So we do care what people say, but ideally, I care what people say because I recognize that I'm representing Judaism. And therefore, I want people to have a good thing about Judaism. But what people are going to say or not say should not influence my doing mitzvot or not. It might lead me to doing the mitzvah in a little more subdued fashion, like the example I gave of the davening, but that's fine. But I'm doing that not because people will laugh at me. I'm doing that because I want to be a good, positive ambassador for Hashem. Okay, so Elihu said, "Al na esa panaish." I'm not going to try to find favor in anyone's eyes. Ve'el adam lo echaneh. And to a person, if I need to give rebuke to that person, I'm not going to echaneh. I'm not going to start to hem and haw and to hint or to say it in this way or in that way. Ki lo yadati echaneh. I don't even know how to do that. Meaning, I do what I need to do with Hashem, and I don't allow what people are going to say or do to affect what I say or do. Right? I'm going to deal with God. Again, we have to be concerned. We do have to be concerned to make sure that we're making a Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, but that shouldn't deter us from doing what it is that we need to do. You know, it's interesting. Chabad has this very good. You see Chabad walking around the airports in their talis and their tefillin, and they're out there. They don't really care. It's interesting. Sometimes it comes out in different ways, right? We had a beautiful Hachnasat Sefer Torah that one of our members here did at a Chabad a little south of here, and as part of it, they don't have a campus like we have. So they're in a parking lot, and they ended up closing off one of the roads with a fire engine and with the police. So they had the nod from all the city officials, right? But it was interesting. Chabad is a different approach. I felt a little bit uneasy that we were stopping traffic for so long for all these people who probably wanted to get home and thinking like, what are these Jews doing? Why are they dancing in the street? Why can't they just dance in their synagogue? Right? That's I don't know. That's how I was feeling when I held the Torah. I tried to keep it moving at a good pace to try to get back off the main road so the police could reopen the flow of traffic. Right? That's how I look at it. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I think there's validity to what I'm saying. I think there's also validity to the Chabad approach, which is put it all out there. And maybe there's one Jew, right, who's going to be passing by or is going to be waiting in the traffic and say, Why am I not there dancing with my brothers? I need to find out more about what it means to be a Jew. And who knows if this won't turn his life around. So, I think Chabad leans towards put it all out there. And some people might be a little bit upset, but maybe we'll find one Jew and dust them off a little bit. And I think the non-Chabad, more I call it modern Orthodox approach is let's not make waves and let's not give people reason to be cursing the Jews under their breath as they're trying to get home for dinner and they're stuck behind a police block there for 20 minutes, right? So I think we do have to take into account what other people, but not that therefore I'm not going to do a mitzvah, right? And when I'm taking into account what other people are saying, not for my honor, but I'm taking into account what other people are going to say because I'm concerned about Hashem's honor, because I recognize that I'm representing, right? When I make a point of wearing my kippah when I go onto a plane and helping anyone who needs help lifting their bags up into the carry-on, I'm not thinking that they're going to say, oh, this guy's a nice guy. I'm thinking they're going to say, oh, that Jewish fellow was a nice guy. They'll never see me again. They don't know my name. They'll never know me again. But I'm not doing it for them to say nice things about me. I'm doing it so I want to represent Hashem in as good a way as possible. But if it's going to get so doing it with other people thinking in mind when I want their thoughts to be positive towards Judaism, towards God, that's perfectly fine. But when I'm going to doing it because I want people to think highly about myself, and therefore I will or won't do certain things, that is the danger zone that he's speaking about over here. On one hand, the danger zone. And when I could totally focus my mind, then that is the focus on Yichud HaMaseh for Hashem, focusing, unifying my actions for Hashem. That's a way that we elevate. Okay. V'roi ata. And now it's proper. Sheniva'er. I will explain me'inyanei Yichud HaMasim levakim shisha inyanim. I'm going to explain this 6 different topics over here. And that's going to comprise the 6 chapters of this shar, of this gateway. Echa mehem, number 1, Mahu Yichud HaMaseh leLokim. What is this? What is the meaning of focusing our actions to Hashem? Sheni, secondly, Bameh Yihiyeh, right? How do we get there? Shlishi, thirdly, Be'eza Maseh Chayavim Bo. Which type of actions does this apply to? Harivi'i, fourthly, Kama Mine Mafsidav. What are the things that cause us to lose this focus and to have our minds and hearts and intent diverted away from where it's supposed to be, away from Hashem? Chamishi, number 5, Ech ofanei harchakatam min hanefesh ad sheyitachen livnei adam liached kol maaseh she'asar l'shem hakel. Number 5 is what can we do, right? What are the things that we can do to distance ourselves from number 4, from those things that cause us to lose the focus? And that way we'll be able to actually focus, unify our thoughts and our actions towards Hashem, right? The term that's often used is lishma. To do something, lishma literally means for the name, right? For the sake of Hashem and not for any side gains or side focuses that we have. To be fair, one of the famous maxims of this ages is La'olam Yasok Adam B'Torah Shelo Lishma. A person should always be involved in Torah and mitzvah and serving Hashem Shelo Lishma, right? Even though one might have some side intents, it's not lishma. It's not totally focused on Hashem. Shemitok Shelo Lishma, Ba Lishma, right? Normally understood that, and from doing it Shelo Lishma, you'll get yourself into the habit, and then hopefully you'll be able to raise that level, raise that focus, and from that Shalol Lishma, you could reach the point of Lishma to get the proper focus. Or some explain Mitoch Shalol Lishma, perhaps within that big pool of all those Shalol Lishma actions that we did, there might be a few that actually were Lishma, right? So we won't say if you're not going to do it at the greatest focus level, don't do it at all. Heaven forbid. Right? Do as much as you can do. Better to do it with some ulterior motives than to not do it at all. And then let that be a first step that we can then raise the bar and elevate ourselves and our actions to doing it in a more purified manner. And lastly, Hashishi, the last chapter of this gateway, Shenizar b'machshava v'nishar mimenu umoshel ba. Right? And 6 is that a person needs to be careful with our thoughts, to be careful from wrong thoughts, and to control our thoughts. It's fascinating. One of the things that often draws people to Judaism or gives them a reason to really give it some serious thought is the idea of lashon hara. Right? Actually, someone forwarded to me a clip of of uh, um, of Ivanka Kushner on YouTube, where she speaks about lashon hara. She speaks about this concept of of not speaking badly about others, right? And in the secular world, so we have libel, right? There is a legal concept of libel that if I falsely slander someone and that's going to cause them loss, right? Then I can be sued for that. I don't know exactly the parameters, but my layman's understanding of libel is it needs to be pretty egregious, needs to be false, and it needs to have caused damage. And in Judaism, if it's true, but it's derogatory, it's lashon hara. And if no discernible monetary loss is caused by that, it doesn't make a difference, right? We have a whole compendium of laws, hilchot lashon hara, the laws of speaking badly, the laws of proper speech, right? And people are moved by that. Like, wow, this is an elevated society. This is an elevated religion. It's a religion that elevates a person. That I'm accountable not just for my actions, but also for my words. And over here we see not just for our words, but even for our machshavot, even for our thoughts. We say Hashem is bochein machshavot halev. Hashem delves into the thoughts of a person's heart. And even that can make a tremendous, tremendous difference. You have two people who seem to be doing the same exact action, but in fact, those actions can be worlds apart based on what this one's focus is and what that one's focus is. And that is how Judaism really is something that is all encompassing in what it's meant to do, which is to elevate a human being and bring a human being, a physical human being, closer to that spiritual, eternal God. And even our thoughts are of tremendous importance and are our responsibility, right? It's our responsibility. So Shishi, the third chapter of this fifth gate of Shar Yichud HaMaaseh, is to be nizhar b'machshava, to be careful with our thoughts, v'nishmar mimenu, and guard ourselves from improper thoughts, umoshel ba, and to rule over our thoughts, right? We can decide what we're going to think about, where our thoughts are going to be focused. Okay, so that is the intro, Perek Aleph, Number 1, chapter 1. Aval mahu yichud hamaseh le'elokim. So what is this yichud, this focusing of one's actions le'elokim to God? Hu hakavana. This is one's intent. Ba nireh uba nistar. When it comes to the actions that I do b'nireh, in a visible manner, uba nistar, and those that are hidden, b'maaseh, in these actions of avodat Elokim that I'm doing, serving Hashem, that it should be, as you said before, the term lishmo. It should be lishma, which means for the name of, for the sake of Hashem. That is my motivating factor. Lagia el ritzono bilvad, and only bilvad, just to lagia el ritzono, that I should fulfill His will. That's what I want to do. Mibilti ritzon habruim, right? Without any concern of ritzon, the praise that I'll get, the ratzon that I might come from habiruim, right? From, it's interesting, from people. But what is it? How does he term people? Bruim, creations. And I think by doing that, he's making a point by choosing that word, right? Meaning, if I say, well, there's God and people, it's one thing. If I say there's a creator and creations, so then it makes it very clear that my focus should not be on the creations. My focus needs to be on the creator. That is where my focus needs to be. And I often say, I try to do it sometimes, that sometimes it's great to do a mitzvah of sorts and to do it in a way that no one knows and no one will ever know. And that's a way that we can try to guide ourselves to even when we are doing it in front of other people, to try to have that focus that that I'm not doing it for them, I'm doing it for Hashem. It's not easy to say, Hashem, this one's for you, right? No one else besides me and you will ever know that I did this. And that's good. And that's good sometimes to get ourselves into that habit and into that mindset. Now, very often it's important to do things that other people do see in order to set a good example. Right? One of the things that I like to do after I wash my hands, I like to fill the cup for the next person. So sometimes it's nice to do that, and no one knows, no one's around, good. So no one knows that I filled the cup. But it's also good when people are around that people should, the children, people should learn, you wash your hands, beautiful. As you're standing there drying your hands anyhow, about to make your bracha v'motzi, why not utilize that time to hit that spigot and fill it up for the next person? And then, right? So there is a balance. There is a balance of doing things without other people knowing, and also of setting an example for others and trying to help guide them on a path, on a certain path. Actually, there's a pasuk, Hanistarot Lashem Elokeinu, Vaniglot lanu ulevanenu ad olam. All right, and this is a story, I forgot where I read that people went to a shiva house to make a minyan for a shiva house, a person who died, and there was not going to be a minyan. So one of the shuls got word that there's a person who passed away. He has some sons whom are not involved in the Jewish community, but they would like to have a minyan. So a bunch of men went over there to help make the minyan. And when they went to the house, they went into the deceased, the person, it was his house. They went into his library, and they were surprised to see a pretty extensive Jewish library, but not a Jewish library of the Idiot's Guide to Tefillin, or but a Jewish library with serious Hebrew texts. And they asked the boys if they could leaf through some of the texts, and they saw that it wasn't just Hebrew texts, but there were notes written inside these Sfarim. So their father was a learned person of a fairly high caliber, and yet his children seem to be not connected and really very clueless. And after they finished the services, they got into a conversation with some of these with the children, and the sons explained whatever reason the father did this, but basically, look, maybe he was scarred from a Holocaust and didn't want to burden his kids. Who knows what? And I'm not judging in any way, but what they said was he would come home from work and then he would kind of sequester himself in his study and do his Torah study there. But none of us were ever really privy to that, and none of us were ever really a part of that. And on that, a rabbi, when he heard this story, applied the pasuk Hanistarot LaHashem Elokeinu va'niglot lanu ulvanenu ad olam. The simple meaning is, what the pasuk means is, that which is hidden is for Hashem, but that which is revealed is for us and our children. So what the pasuk is actually addressing is the idea of giving rebuke, meaning if someone's doing something in a hidden way and you don't know, okay, that's not your responsibility. But if someone is doing something and you are aware of it, then you should try to correct that wrong. So that which is hidden is for Hashem to take care of. That which is revealed, we do need to get involved and try to help this person, try to guide this person on a better path and a better direction. But they applied it to this situation, that which he did in such a secretive, behind the closed door of his study manner, that was LaHashem. But Niglot, had he done it in a revealed manner, then it might have been for him and his children and for generations. So there needs to be this balance of focusing and doing it for Hashem. That's always the case. And sometimes doing things that no one else will ever know that you're the one who did it, that you did it. And that way we get ourselves into the habit of doing it for Hashem and not for others. But at the same time, also, it is important, like we mentioned before, the idea of doing things nicely in a public way, caring about what people will say because you want to sanctify God's name and bring credit and honor to the Jewish people, right? Also, there is an idea of doing things in a public manner so that children, friends, whatever it is, will see and that they could also follow suit. So there is this balance, and there also needs to be, again, it goes back to how we began, that so much depends on what are my thoughts, what is my focus, why am I doing this? Am I doing this so people will also follow suit, or people will say, oh, Ciner is such a good guy, right? To try to have that focus of why we do things. Perek Bet, chapter 2. Aval bameh yiyeh yichud hamaseh lelokim levado, right? How does one reach this level of having this singular, focused intent that I'm doing this for Hashem, for the mitzvah? So, ba'asara inyanim. There are 10 different, or 10 hakdamot, we'll say. There are 10 prefaces that we need to give over here. Kasher yitkaimu b'lev adam. That once these are established, rooted in a person's heart, vitbarer atzlo, and a person is clear to them, and it's clear to a person, kihim adne, that these are the basis, the sockets of avodatov, serving Hashem, the sharshe, and the roots of all of his actions. Yushlam yichudo b'hem l'shem hakel. That will help a person reach this proper focus and not turn lo yifaneh el zulato, v'lo yikaveh biladav, and will not be hoping to gain from other people as a result. And your intention will be on nothing but doing the will of Hashem, making this connection to Hashem. And what are these 10? So if this is the 5th gate, the first 4 are going to be basically what the 4 gates were about. Rishon number 1, Yichud Elokim b'leiv shalem. The first gate was recognizing the unity of God, right? And that it's this one all-encompassing God over everything. He's the God in my shul. He's also the God when no one's watching, and no matter where I am. He's my God when I'm on vacation. He's my God wherever I am. That's the Yichud Elokim. That's number 1. Sheni, number 2. Habechina. That was the Shar Bechina. That's where we actually began. We started learning probably a number of years ago already. When we started learning this, Bechina is appreciating and finding God. Bechina, ascertaining and realizing, recognizing, acknowledging Tovot Elokim, the good that Hashem showers down upon us. V'hatmadatan alav, in a constant basis, as we explained in the 2nd gate. Shlishi, the 3rd, is the 3rd gate. Sheikabel havod elokim. A person must accept upon themselves this responsibility of serving Hashem, of doing the will of Hashem. As we mentioned there, Rivi'i, that's a gate that we just finished now. Sheyodeh b'bitachon alav miltiabruim, to place one's trust and one's faith and one's reliance on God and not on any of His creations. Again, he likes to use the word creations because that helps to contrast, right? Why am I going to deal with the creation when I can deal with the Creator? Hachamishi, number 5 now. Shiyamin, to believe and to really internalize that any gain or loss is not in the hands of any of God's creations. And they have no ability besides the Reshut Aborei, besides the permission, besides if it's being sanctioned by God. Hashishi, 6thly, Shiashavetzlo, Adam Uyaganuhu, whether people will praise me or they will condemn me. Again, when it comes to things that I'm doing the Ratzon Hashem, whether it's going to bring me praise or criticism, I'm going to do what I need to do. Shvi, 7thly, Shiyazov Ayipui Livnei Adam. So not always be trying to look good in the eyes of people. Hashmini, 8, Lifnot Libo Measkei Olam Ba'etshu Osel Olam Haba. To not be thinking about this world gains when I'm touching eternity and doing my mitzvot. Vatashii, number 9, Sheireme Elokim, V'yavosh Mimenu, to be in awe of Hashem and to feel embarrassed when I do things wrong or when I'm doing things out of concern for others as opposed to connect to Hashem. Lastly, Ha'asiri, the 10th one, She'iva'etz imasechel b'chol hirurei hayetzer b'libo l'kabel atzato mivolti atzat yitzro. Right? That to deal with our seichel, to make sure that we are honestly evaluating the things that we do, our actions, our words, our thoughts, to really to evaluate it with a seichel, with a clear mind, and not be pulled by our yetzer, by our inclination that loves to pull us in these lots of different directions. And that is to really be in control of our minds, right? And to do what we know is right, and not to rationalize or convince ourselves otherwise. Our minds are very powerful, and they are great at convincing ourselves of different things, and to be strong and honest with the way that we appraise ourselves, appraise situations. So those are the 10 sort of preconditions. And next week we'll start with Perek Gimel, the third chapter. Okay? So I imagine this is 5-3, we're up to 5-3-1 in Sefaria. This is pretty easy so far. Yes, when we get to the long chapters that it gets a little bit confusing, the 5-3, whatever it might be. Okay, my friends. Good learning with everybody. Have a
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi
good
Ciner.
week. How are things out there where you are, Steve?
They're
Stay
great. Have our 2 grandsons over for a couple of days, so we're having a good
beautiful.
time.
Beautiful. That makes it worthwhile being in cold climate. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Good night, Carol. Good night, Steve. Best of Trudy, Steve.
Take care.